Welcome to Chapter 8. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about how to process payroll and track payroll information for your company's employees. In this case, again, we're going to stay with Kristen Reyna. So now that we've gone through the book, we've gone through customers, vendors, we've gone through end-of-period procedures, we've set up new companies, we're finally getting to payroll. Now, in Chapter 8, we're only talking about payroll setup. Chapter 9 is when we're going to actually do payroll. So the focus of Chapter 8 is to get us ready to process payroll. That means that we're going to compute employees' gross earnings. We're going to determine their withholdings and deductions. We're also going to calculate then their net pay. We're going to prepare their paychecks, properly record transactions, journal entries that are involved, and then submitting payment for those withholdings. For example, if we were in Wisconsin, it'd be the Wisconsin Department of Revenue, or in this case, it's Minnesota Department of Revenue, and then the federal Social Security, FICA Med, Medicare payments as well to the government through EFTPS. So in order to process payroll in QuickBooks, first have to set it up. Now, right now on the screen, you're going to see that I do have the payroll section enabled in my file. If it is not enabled in your file, all you need to do is go up to the Help menu, and you're going to go to QuickBooks Help, or you could just hit the F1 button. So I'm going to go to Help, and turning QuickBooks into using manual payroll is not easy. It's kind of hidden. Why is that? QuickBooks, of course, in the real world wants you to pay for payroll. We're not paying for it since we're a school. So we're doing manual payroll, which is not ideal. In the real world, no. You'd want to at least pay QuickBooks so that you could have the updated tax tables and that. But for class purposes, we're going manually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in here manual payroll, do a search, and it says down here, it says answers and help. Calculate payroll taxes manually. It says without a subscription, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to click here. And what we're going to do is it says set your company file to use the manual payroll calculation. So I'm going to click here, manual. And then it says before, it's applied, blah, 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 blah. So they're giving you all these warnings basically because, like I said, they want you to pay for payroll. But again, for class purposes, we're just going to go ahead and keep it manual. So I'm going to set my company. A little box here came up. It says you must now calculate and enter your amounts manually. I'm going to click on OK. And that's basically what you need to know. If this payroll section down here where it says employees, if that's not there, that means that you have to go in under Help and manually set up your file. All right, so let's get into talking about our payroll definitions and terms and getting into actually setting up our employees for payroll. So, whether or not payroll is processed manually or through a product such as QuickBooks, you still have to have a good understanding of payroll laws, procedures, filings, for example, the W-2, the 941, things like that, definitions and terminology. So some of the things that we're going to start with here is just getting in the employee payroll information. So we've learned in the past that, we've had our vendor area, we've had our customer area, our employees area. All of those things are, the look and feel of them is very similar. So for example, if I go into employees, this looks very similar to what I had with customers and vendors. However, the difference is that this is for employees. So if I were to go in here and go into new employee, this is where I would put in, Bob Smith, put in a social security number, fake numbers, right? Okay. Assume this is a gentleman here. Date of birth. And then married or not, I'm just going to keep it simple. Say they're single. U.S. citizen, yes, but there's all kinds of questions in here about ethnicity. Then there's disability questions, military. Again, not all of these we're going to populate. Again, the purpose of Chapter 8 is to get us ready to process Chapter 9. So again, I'm going to go in under address and contact. I can put in their home address. Additional information. This is really nice. Instead of using their social security number to identify employees, it's always a best practice to actually add an employee ID. So this is my employee number 1. I'm keeping it simple, okay? And then under payroll information, this is where I can choose, hey, what payroll schedule is this person on? I can add in a new payroll schedule, meaning let's do a weekly person, meaning they're paid weekly. Actually, let's make it biweekly. Okay, biweekly, they're paid every 2 weeks. This is very common. Sometimes it's semi-monthly, which means twice a month, or monthly. It says, what is the pay period end date? I'm just going to make up a date here. What date should appear? Again, I'm just going to go with Halloween here. Click on OK. Okay, so this person's biweekly. Because we're manual, I cannot set up the direct deposit. I can, however, set up taxes. So this is where I can go in and say, hey, this person has, I'm going to leave it at 0, but maybe they have 1 allowance. And again, you would get that from their form that they fill out when they get hired, as far as what their withholdings are for federal. And then you can also put in their withholdings in that for state. I'm going to click on continue here. So I'm going to hit cancel here. All right, so then under employee information, this is where we put in, okay, when they were hired. If you get let go, that's where you put that date. Whether you're full or part-time, I'm going to say this person's full-time. You can put in their job title. I mean, there's lots and lots and lots of information in here that you can add in. So back to payroll information, there's also a sick vacation area in here, which is actually an appendix that we're going to be covering, which is in the back of the book, just to give you some exposure to it. One thing I didn't do is put in this person's earnings. So under payroll information, I'm going to go ahead and put in this person as an hourly worker. Let's say that their rate per hour is $15 an hour. And then what's nice is when I run payroll, which we get into Chapter 9, their rate of 15 always shows up, and I can always adjust their hours, meaning if they had overtime or it was just regular hours, so it makes things very easy. So let's go into a little bit more detail about our taxes. Now, FICA tax, I'm talking about Social Security and also FICA Med. FICA Med is Medicare. According to the FICA Act, again, the rate is 6.2% for now. May change. That means both the employer and the employee have to pay that. Every year, the cap or the ceiling changes. For 2015, it's 118,500 is the limit for each employee. Once they reach that limit, they no longer have to pay into FICA. Then the Medicare rate, that's also 1.45. There's no wage minimum for that. But again, the employer does for FICA, Social Security, and Medicare, the employer has to match what the employee is paying. So obviously, when you have a new employee, yeah, they're going to have Medicare, Social Security, and even here we'll get into FUTA. So federal income tax, everybody's got to pay, right? There's two true things in life, right? Death and taxes. So the IRS has tables, instructions, and all that as far as determining the withholding amount. And then once that's withheld, then the employer has to then forward the tax that was withheld to the government for payment on Social Security and Medicare. Okay. The next tab over is state. So right now we don't have our state set up, but I believe for our book purposes it's going to be Minnesota. And it says state subject to withholding. Again, I'm going to say that they are in Minnesota. And here we go. They're single. We're going to keep their allowances at 0. If they filled out their form and wanted an extra withholding, that's where you would put that in. But again, that would have to be that money that is withheld from the employee's check would have to be remitted to the state of Minnesota. Then we get into FUTA. That's only for the employer. So under federal here, there's FUTA, and only the employer would have to pay that. Again, that's used for unemployment insurance programs for the federal government. Then we get into state unemployment, which is right here. So in addition to FUTA, employers also have to pay and contribute to the state unemployment insurance fund. And again, that varies from state to state. And rates can vary up to like 11%. So again, depending on where that is. So once we get to the point where we set up all the earnings, we set up all the deductions, Your earnings are your gross wages, less your deductions, company contributions, things like that. So when you take your earnings, less your deductions, guess what? That's your net pay. And that's the amount that is going to actually be on your paycheck. The next part I want to discuss is updating the chart of accounts list for payroll. Now, when you go into your chart of accounts, I'm just going to do a quick Control A here. When you first go into your chart of accounts, you may notice that if payroll is not on, guess what? Your payroll liabilities and that are missing. So that's a question sometimes students ask when they get into doing the project at the end. So once that's the payroll feature is activated, meaning I went in, I manually turned on payroll, then guess what? My liabilities show up so that I can have a place to put those. And again, we have it set up separately, which makes sense, meaning you've got a payroll liability account for your Social Security, for federal, which is FIT, state income tax, FUTA, and SUTA. So all of those are listed separately. So just like with any of your chart of accounts that you had, with your chart of accounts that you had worked with when you had set up a new company, if you needed to go in and modify this in any way, you could go in and edit, you could add in a new account. But again, out of the box, what's nice is when you turn on payroll, your accounts show up, which is nice, and your payroll expenses down here as well. Under lists, though, let's get into talking about the payroll item list. So here we go. So when I went into the employee window, which is over here, for each employee I can go ahead and set up their tax information, but all of that information is actually linked into our payroll item list, which is under lists and then under payroll. And in this area, this is where we have, you know, salary wages, hourly wages. We have our federal unemployment tax, our federal withholding, FIT, our Medicare for the company and the employee, and then the same thing for Social Security or FICA for both. And then we have our Minnesota, our state withholding. And what's nice is that if I need to change this, for example, under Minnesota withholding, if I need to go in and edit this, I'm going to go in and do a custom here. And that's fine. Oh, I don't want to do a new one. Whoops. I wanted to edit that one. Edit the payroll item. So this is where I can go, you know, if I made a mistake, I can make sure that you know what, did I choose the right account? That could be an issue. What does it apply to? And then hit on finish. You know, for the federal withholding, if we go in and we look at this, you can see again, is it set up to go to the right account? And does it apply to hourly salary? Yes. Click on finish. So with any of these, again, if you need to add a new item, you would just go to new. And then you can use the easy setup or the custom. I would the book as you go through easy, go into next, and then you can say, you know, is this a retirement benefit, or is this sick or vacation time? Is this insurance benefits, or is this some type of other garnishment or something like that? And then you would set it up. So let's pretend, you know, that we've got some retirement benefits. I'm going to hit on next. I'm going to click on yes. I'm going to leave this as is. All right. Oops, my QuickBooks file is updating. And then I get this screen, you know, let's say it's a 401k. Click on next. And then you can put in who it's to. So I'm going to say Roth IRA. Let's just put in a fake account number. And click on next. And then hit finish. So now it's gone in and it's actually set up this 401k. And then you can see here that it's got the employee and the match. Actually, in the chapter, not setting that up, but just to show you how you go ahead and enter in a new payroll item. One thing to remember too is that when you go ahead and manually put these in, you can see that we've got the Medicare rate here, we've got the Social Security rate, we've got the federal unemployment rate. You know, because we're doing it manually, guess what? If those rates change and we're still on the old rates, guess what? That means that our employee paychecks are wrong. So it's really important with the setup of this in the real world to have an understanding that it is worthwhile to actually at least pay for the portion of QuickBooks to at least give you updated rates, because that could cause a lot of errors. All right, so generally I've gone over, you know, the setup of payroll, how to turn it on, going into the chart of accounts, going into your payroll item list, going into your employee center, and managing that information. So the very last part actually talks about going to reports and looking at some of our report options. Under payroll, which was actually under employees and payroll, I wish it was just under payroll, this is where you can look at, for example, your payroll summary. Now, I haven't actually done any payroll yet, so obviously this is empty. But my payroll summary basically shows me, a summary of what has been done in payroll, meaning employee wages, employer taxes. We also have other reports, such as our employee earnings summary. That one we'll actually look at in Chapter 9. One of the basic reports we're going to look at, too, is under reports and under list. We're going to go to our payroll item listing. And this shows us our setup of what we went through in Chapter 8 as far as looking at our tax setup, the percentages, the limits, if there are applicable limits, which account that it's tied to, and then basically gives us a nice summary. So in a nutshell, that's the presentation for Chapter 8. Again, Chapter 8 is just the setup. We are not actually doing payroll. We'll do payroll when we get into Chapter 9. Thank you.